Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Dev Diary. So to get everyone up to speed, recently I played the tower defense / mining game Wall World. And while an enjoyable experience, I wanted to create a faster, more arcade-like version, which we started doing last time with a focus on the mining. And so anytime the player would go on a mining expedition, the tile-based endeavor would randomly generate a completely new, quote-unquote world. And surprisingly, creating competent mining mechanics was a bit of a challenge. Regardless, mining was added, and we can now focus on the combat. So leave a like if you enjoyed today's video, and subscribe if you're new to the channel. Also remember to turn on those notifications so you don't miss future videos. So combat in Wall World is pretty straightforward. Like most tower defense games, it's all timer based with enemies appearing in waves of increasing difficulties. So an enemy spawn system was created that would treat each wave as its own unique entity. This means that there is potential for wave overlap, but that only adds to the chaos. Anyway, for the sake of testing, there is really only 3 levels of waves. The first wave is 10 ground units, the second wave is a mixture of 10 ground units and air units, and the third wave is a mixture of 20 ground and air units. And because we use a general object for enemies, behavior specifics such as move speed are defined on spawn. Speaking of enemies, they're purposely basic as you would expect from a tower defense game. The ground units will move either left or right depending on their spawn origin, while flying enemies will move towards the player's home base. Each continue moving until they reach attack range, to which they switch to their attack phase. Air units create projectiles that damage the player's base on collision, and the ground units outright damage the base since they only attack when within melee range. Again, these are just basic forms of the 2 class types, and variations are definitely possible in the future. Now obviously the player needs a way to actually defend their base, which is what that big old cannon is for. It's controlled via a new home struct that exists primarily to keep track of the base data, such as stats and resource storage. This includes the properties of that big old cannon, which can only be controlled when the player is inside the base, and works as it does in Wall World, with the cannon pointing towards the player's mouse cursor. And indeed, things like the cannon's rotation speed and fire rate can be upgraded, which requires resources, meaning we need to take a quick trip back to the mining section of our game. Resources mined now count towards a storage array, which is part of the home base. They are rewarded to the player in random amounts anytime a resource block is destroyed. And fun side note, the laser needed a minor rework due to oversights, thanks to bad decisions made last episode. Yay! Anyway, an upgrade menu was also added displaying 6 different stats that can be upgraded: base HP, turret rotation, turret fire rate, player movement speed, player laser length, and laser damage. Each require their own resource amounts, which all are handled via a single function. Now this function actually serves 2 purposes. First, anytime it's called, resource requirements for said upgrade are retrieved from a switch. And depending on the action argument, the function will either return those requirements or use them to attempt an upgrade. If the requirement check passes, then the upgrade is applied via another switch. And another fun fact, the requirements were meant to increase with each level, however, somewhere along the line I broke the math. I know, surprising, right? So, for the sake of time, the requirements are just static. Now, there are caps on some things, especially speed-based stats, because, too much speed will eventually break something. Though I should stress that this is more of a test anyway and will probably be rewritten somewhere in the future. Because right now, stats are spread across both the player and home base structs, which is tedious to keep track of and can definitely be improved on. Anyway, that was a session, and I did manage to do what I set out to accomplish: a faster paced version of Wall World where everything is a bit more frantic. Now there's obviously a ton of room for improvement and expansion, and some surprises. For example, my bad math I think worked out for the better in terms of upgrade prices. I actually kind of think that it's better to keep things static so the player doesn't have to keep track of different amounts as they mine. That way mining is more like supermarket sweep than slow and methodical. Now variations of melee and projectile based enemies for both classes is also a definite must in terms of additions, as well as more stats, weapons, and features. But here's the kicker. Should we pursue it? Again, there's obviously a lot of potential here, but I just don't know if we could necessarily bring anything new or, interesting to the table with this one. I mean, nothing that's not just, hey, let's completely remake Wall World, So I leave it up to you guys. Should we continue working on this project or just let this be the end of it? Leave any and all thoughts in the comments. And as always, you can play a bunch of previously featured games and get early access to the weekly videos by subscribing to my Patreon. And with that said, brings us to the end of today's Dev Diary, so thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.